This project began unfortunately, about 3 years ago. My timing was atrocious because we ran into COVID. We had a project together which was twice this size, and then Rotary spent so much money on COVID emergency response, they had to, as you know, cut back by about 50% the support that they provide to the grants. So we had to reconfigure the thing. And then the district in Africa, which encompassed both Uganda and Tanzania, was grossly overworked. It took us 18 months to get responses from people and reviews. They subsequently, about 8 months ago, split the district in half. And even though we had resolved most of the issues, we still had to go through a process with repeat a lot of it with the new district people. So it's been a long time coming, but we are almost there. So this is about coffee, Northwest Tanzania, and originally 300 families for $100,000. Now it's 150 families, in the village name of Kigazi. The key organizations that are involved: my club, Harborside, we're the sponsor club. The host club, whose president is a very good friend of mine for the last 15 years. And the Bukoba is the name of the town, Kagera Uhuru Club. The large national NGO that I've been working with for over 15 years is called the KOPLING Society of Tanzania. That's the extended KOPLING family around the world is the lay apostolate of the Catholic Church. They're more into economic development and improving people's socioeconomic situations than they are into saving souls, which is why I've aligned myself with them. So finally, we've got 8 clubs involved, 6 Canadian, 1 American, and several provinces in Canada, and the Tanzanian host club. And we're in a situation where we have the funding to proceed with the project as configured, but because we cut it in half, anybody I talk with, if they're interested in being involved in the project, we will expand the project incrementally beyond the current scope to reflect any kind of funding that comes in. A lot of people probably have not been to Tanzania, so a little bit of geography. Obviously, this is Africa. There's Lake Victoria, the pearl of the heart of Africa. This is Tanzania here, east of Congo, south of Kenya and Uganda. To home in a little closer, Lake Victoria, the part of Tanzania that I'm working in is the town of Bukoba is right there on the western shore of the lake, and the land rises towards Rwanda, becomes quite mountainous. The kind of coffee that's grown changes as you go through increasing elevations, but Lake Victoria is at about 4,500 feet of elevation. So I can't work in places like Dar es Salaam down here because of the humidity. It just doesn't work for me. But up at 4,500 feet, the heat and the humidity is bearable. So that's where we work. So what's the context? Basically, the population is subsistence farmers who grow their own food, or most of their own food, and their only cash crop is coffee that they intercrop. It's an orphan business due to my phrase, but due to a lot of complicated history and politics. Typically, the income is less than $1 a day for the whole family. In fact, the project that we're working on, it's about 60 cents a day. So they obviously live mostly off their food crops on their small holdings. But, kids die of malaria because they haven't got $10 to go to the hospital and get medicine. Kids don't go to school because they don't have $7 for fees or uniforms. It's that kind of a place. There's no potable water system there. So it's really the poorest of the poor. This picture is from about 12 years ago when Jerry Mushema, the lady here, and myself were meeting with the farmers in the first village in their place of business, which is sitting in a field, explaining the concept to them. And at the beginning, they thought I was from Mars. Even with Jerry, who's a very, very respected agronomist, and these people love her dearly. The kinds of things that I was telling them that we could accomplish, they basically didn't believe at the outset. All of this, the insights, I'm an old oil guy, and the insights from the coffee business came as a result of a 4-month placement in Kampala with VSO. It was a coffee marketing organization called the AFCA, East African Fine Coffees. They wanted to develop a strategy to help the people who produce most of the coffee in East Africa, which are smallholders. They're not grown on big plantations, except in the highlands in certain countries. So that's where I spent 4 months like a sponge, just picking the brains of the leading lights in Kampala and Nairobi of the people in the coffee business. So that's how an old oil guy became knowledgeable in the coffee business. So I brought the ideas to the KOPLING Society. Interestingly, they had always been focused on food security. And of course, food security means food crops. They had never considered the possibility that a dramatic enhancement of a cash crop could, in a roundabout way, positively impact food security and general quality of life. So I brought the ideas. They've done all the heavy lifting. It's been a mutual learning experience. So it's a full value chain project, all the way from agronomic practices through to international marketing, understanding the coffee value chain. Key cross-cutting theme is gender equality and women's rights, about which more later. These farmers, you know, the saying about it takes a village to raise a kid. Well, in Northwest Tanzania, it's total nonsense. People are in survival mode, and it's about your family surviving. They didn't cooperate about anything. And they didn't even know that there were certain people in the village that were producing 5 times as much yield from their coffee plants as most of them. And then we have a financial component. A SACCOS, in case you're wondering, is a savings and credit cooperative society, a microfinance bank that's totally run by the farmers and is financed not by Rotary money, but totally by the earnings from their coffee business. So the plan, the keystone technology is trucking massive amounts of cow poop around rural Africa. Without that, we'd have no project. So that's a little ironic. We provide them with the basic tools to be able to husband their coffee plant husbandry, do it properly, and provide them with raised drying tables in order to get the coffee off the ground. They used to dry it on tarps, and that has obvious negatives. Coffee beans, by the way, if you store them properly, they last forever, but they suck up waterborne odors like a sponge. And once a bad odor is in a batch of coffee, it's worth very, very little. So there was a massive opportunity to improve quality. And if there's the regulatory approvals from the government for a whole variety of aspects of the project, which the KOPLING Society has managed. Very briefly, we did a baseline study. I insisted that we not pick a village at random just because the leadership was good. So we did, I'll just show a couple of these graphs, and this shows average yield per coffee bush versus the size of the shamba, of the operation, or of the small holding that the farmers have. And you'll notice a general trend that the larger they are, the lower the yields. Less love per individual coffee bush because farmers all do this on their own. The other thing, this is a more interesting one. It shows you that the number scale goes from 0 to 7 on this one. 2 or 3 farmers in the village that have 3 times, 4 times the average yield, which is around 2, but no communication between the farmers. When we showed them this data, it was fascinating because we had to anonymize it so that nobody would be insulted by the fact that, you know, Mohammed over on the left side of the village had 4 times as much coffee as these other guys. One village, it was lovely because the best coffee farmer in the whole village was a woman. I called her Mama Kahawa. Kahawa's coffee in Tanzania. So 1,500 farmers, 5 villages. We discovered that the average yields were virtually identical in every village. So we had a typical village to choose from. And we then decided on where the leadership was best and picked our pilot. are pleased to implement the project. This is just out of focus, but it was cut out of a report. Huge truckloads of manure being provided, immense amounts of physical labor. They have to distribute it by wheelbarrow to the individual small holdings. Then it has to, I'll explain later, has to be processed into manure-based compost. It's all a manual process. Then it has to be applied manually to the coffee plants. No automation, no machinery. This is Richard Simoni, who's the leader of the project. This rather scruffy looking thing here is the key to the success of the project. It's a heap of interlayered green vegetation, manure, and local moist soil, which is allowed to cook for between 1 and 2 months and create an enhanced, rich, natural organic fertilizer. This is a picture of an unloved coffee bush, scrawny, tall, a few leaves. You should never need a ladder to harvest from a healthy coffee plant. So this is what things looked like across the village before the project was implemented. And this is the result of the application of a healthy organic fertilizer combined with proper pruning and stumping of the plants. Increases in yield of 300% over 2 to 3 years. Now that's a big number for the only cash crop. This is Richard again. The coffee plants, when properly loved, the yield is so heavy that the branches need to be propped up. So fortunately, coffee plants respond very robustly, no pun intended. These guys are growing Robusta coffee. To grow Arabica, which is the higher value product, you need higher elevations, like towards Rwanda and that. So this is all about Robusta coffee, which is mostly consumed in Europe. It's a quick picture of the very rudimentary raised drying tables that we provided to them to permit enhancing the quality, which is a critical component of the price that's derived in the marketplace. What we gave them here was financial traction. Okay, after 2 years, they had no way to lift themselves up by their own bootstraps. So after 2 years, the farmers completely took over all the costs of purchasing the manure volume jointly and taking on repairs of various aspects of their tools and tables and that. So today, and as of about 5 or 6 years in, the farmers operate 99% of the project with a very, very minimal amount of KOPLING Society support. KOPLING Society views this kind of project as an integral part of their strategic purpose in life. So we have data for every year, or volumes and revenues, participation and other things. So that's my definition of sustainability. It's something that doesn't exist for very many Rotary projects. Once again, this is all the precedent project, okay? And this is a hand-drawn, rather complex chart. My drafting skills with the computer are not that good. But we got US dollars down on the vertical axis, and this is just the various slices of what we've changed. So in 2008, when we did the baseline studies, and I'll talk in terms of shillings here, there was 84 million shillings of revenue. There's about 2,000 shillings in a dollar. So in 2019, if there had been no project, the number would have been 154. And that's normalizing out world coffee price increases in that. Now, the impact of our project is in the next few steps. Increased production has taken things from 154 to 638. In 2019, that was about, almost a 400% increase. Now, coffee plants have a 3-year cycle, so this was a particularly convenient year to choose, but it's big in any year. And then 2019 was the first year that we persuaded the farmers to bulk their coffee and sell it to export instead of to the middlemen, and there was a significant benefit there. Now, so the realized incremental was over 500% in 2019, and that's from 67,000 US dollars to $347,000. So it's almost 300 grand. That's a lot of money for these people who live on 70 cents a day. And it's changed life in the village in ways that even I couldn't have confidently predicted. Only a part of the farmers only a portion of the farmers took part in the export sales in 2019. That is increasing year over year just because they're so desperate for cash that the poorest ones will sell the green beans on the bushes to middlemen, like months before they're harvested. They can't wait for 6 weeks to get 50% more price. And it took us 8 years. Jerry Mashane, the lady who runs us, it took her 8 years to find a coffee purchasing organization in Europe who would provide a significant prepayment based on quality assessment. That's the only way the farmers would take part in the export. It's a huge potential slice, but they simply couldn't because of their desperate need for cash. And something we haven't done yet is organic certification. By definition, this is organic coffee. But the process costs about $15,000 and involves a lot of work. And they've been too busy with other things to pursue this organic certification. That is something that I'm hoping to use to solicit Rotary funds to implement over the next year or two in parallel with the new project. Okay, so fast forward to 2019. This is a selection of the 300, because we did have 300 families initially, the 300 beneficiary representatives who attended the community needs assessment in October of 2019. And we did everything by a show of hands around the project and what they wanted. This is about 15 kilometers from the precedent village that I've been telling you all about. So people know now. We don't have the same hurdle that we did initially where people were just incredulous about this white guy coming in telling them they could multiply their income by 400%. These folks now know that that's a possibility. And so really enthusiastic. There were also a series of meetings held by the cooperating organization, the KOPLING Society, in the prior 6 months where these folks were actively involved in designing specific details of the project, always with consideration to what had been successful down the road. So there's been a number of outcomes here in addition to the income from this precedent project. We did as part of our baseline survey was private surveys with women soliciting input about domestic violence, and it was rampant and driven mostly by economic stresses within the families. Violence against women, based on subsequent confidential surveys, has decreased by 50% as a result of this project. It's a huge change. And as I go and visit, and I do every couple of years here, when absent COVID, I was there every year. There's new roofs on houses. There's several orphans that have been adopted. There's a couple of kids in university. There's a general improvement, significant improvement in nutritional levels and the percentage of the kids that are attending school. Truly transformative for the village. So that is what we're trying to, well, we're not trying to, we're going to replicate in the village of Kigazi. And as I said, we started with 300 families. We had to reduce from 4 sub-villages to 2. And we can grow the project depending on incremental money that flows in beyond the funding that we have for the base thing. So that's the story.